corruption is one of the biggest problems facing development today. And when you start talking about such an omnibus issue as corruption and how it impacts upon development, it's necessary to start examining what actors are out there that might be able to contribute to the anti-corruption agenda. And I think the United Nations Convention Against Corruption is quite clear in stating what strategies need to be adopted by countries and what players or actors have a role to play in moving the anti-corruption agenda forward. And I think the Convention is quite clear when defining public officials or who public officials are, that parliamentarians and members of parliament actually have a very important role, as specified within the Convention, to play in the anti-corruption agenda. So when examining or thinking about ways in which parliamentarians or parliaments as institutions are able to try and curb corruption in their countries, I think there's a multitude of different strategies that they can employ. Generally, when we're working with parliaments, we try and look at it from both developing external and internal strategies. So maybe I just might highlight some of the internal strategies to start with. Some of the problems that parliaments face is that they lack or public perception of parliaments is such that they are as much a part of the problem as a potential solution. So in order for parliaments to be able to be effective role models or effective combatants of corruption, it's necessary for them to be able to try build the legitimacy that they need to be effective oversight institutions. One way in which they're able to do so is by basically setting ethical standards that they can adhere to themselves. There's been a fair bit of research that's been done on this particular topic, and some of it indicates that quite clearly that if you were to survey members of parliament, that there's not necessarily a consensus amongst them as to what constitutes ethical or unethical behaviour. So our recommendation as a starting point is usually to try and formulate that consensus within a parliament and then to entrench that or enshrine that within codes of conduct or codes of ethic. In that way, it becomes quite clear as to how MPs are meant to behave. And this has a kick-on effect in terms of the general public then understands that this is an institution which is committed to the notion of good ethical behaviour, and therefore will have the moral legitimacy as well as the legal legitimacy to combat corruption. Now, once Parliament has that legitimacy, it's then possible to implement external strategies, and they range from everything from passing correct legislation such as anti-corruption and probity legislation, supporting other accountability institutions such as anti-corruption commissions, and then providing effective oversight. And then once again, bringing it back full circle, you can look at the United Nations Convention Against Corruption for some of the areas that parliaments are able to focus on when trying to curb corruption in their countries, ranging from oversight of the budget process to examining procurement practices and the ways in which you can strengthen those procurement practices to ensure that corruption doesn't seep in. But there's a plethora of different initiatives and strategies that can be employed, and I think it all has to be tailored to the specific circumstances on the ground. But whichever way, Parliament has a very important role to play when it comes to curbing corruption.